and in between. It is DebateSensei Limited Preparation Edition, where we talk about things relevant to competitive debate at the college level for limited preparation type debate events. That includes IPDA, NPDA, British parliamentary debate, things like that. I have with me Tim Seavey from San Diego State University. Yay. I am Jared Kubika Miller. I'm a professor of communications, debate coach, and just general enthusiast. So we are going to talk about ripped from the headlines. That's what this series inside a series is. It's the pop culture, current events type stuff. And a very, very recent occurrence that happened is that the No Labels movement has decided not to run a presidential candidate, but also that happened within that movement is one of the founders, Joe Lieberman, recently passed away. That decision is connected to that particular event. So we're going to talk about what the No Labels movement is, what its future might be, and how it may be relevant to debate. All right.
Yeah, it's a tricky time because it feels like everybody's unhappy with options, and yet that's where different organizations, No Labels, seeming to actually gather some traction, are trying to capitalize on that and say, like, if everyone is upset with extremism, how do we go about galvanizing centrist voices and like getting people that don't want just one polar opposite or the other, which is a really appealing message. So when like both presumptive candidates for the respective 2024 elected parties have a significantly higher disapproval rating than approval rating, like that tells you that there exists some opportunity for something else to come in. It's once again like a lesser of two evils, and this is not the first time that's happened. That's happened in prior elections, but it seems like it just keeps getting worse. That just is more anecdotal than from actual like poll data, but it does still seem to be the case that like there don't exist enthusiastic options or exciting galvanizing options. So the New Labels movement is not just here, let's create a presidential candidate. That was one of their initiatives for this year, but they've been around for a good while, right?
Yeah. It's what was it, 2009 is what I found out, and I thought that was surprising. I didn't realize that. I do know that so Joe Lieberman has been kind of one of the main people that is able to draw people in and do donations because he was a Democrat. He actually was nominated as to run as vice president with Al Gore in the 2000 elections. But then he had sort of a change of conscience, and he actually campaigned for John McCain against Barack Obama. And that's where we got Sarah Palin. So at that conference, and so he does kind of embody the idea of no labels. You know what I mean? It's kind of like he was a stalwart Democrat for his entire career, but he had like some friends on the Republican side. He wasn't afraid to speak up for them and make deals and things like that. So it's a pretty big loss, I think, for this movement.
Yeah, and we've talked about it a lot, that I think it's easy to see presidential campaign runs as like the high watermark, or like the real stamp of whether or not a particular party is winning or losing, or whether an idea is winning or losing. And that's really not necessarily fair, because there are just so damn many variables that go into federal presidential elections. Like there's just a lot surrounding that, and a ton of different variables. But their intent has been, policy focused. Like they've honestly been through, how many administrations at this point in time that they've still been around. And they're still policy focused, it seems like, where they'll, be very clear about like, this is where we stand on a particular subject, but it is not a, one party, we stand with the Republicans on this, we stand with the Democrats on this. Like, here's how we feel about this issue. Whoever aligns with us. And I think that is pretty appealing. Like there have been various candidates through time that I think are in recent memory that have kind of run with that message and got some like kudos for it, but then didn't get 8-figure campaign finance to back their ideas, which
Yeah.
tends to be the only thing that gets you through.
Yeah. Well, let's try to think a little bit more about how this might play a role in a debate round.
Sure.
Usually, I like start thinking about are there any potential topics that might involve the no labels, and how would they write those topics? What can you anticipate being that? I'm thinking something along the lines of like I don't know, like an IPDA topic could be like the no labels movement is dead in the water.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's as far as like just the current status. Certainly losing its chairman, and someone that had a
Yeah.
very, very strong, political history and great, donor connection and capability to recruit. Like that has got to be like a major blow to the organization. Like I can't name off the top of my head like other members and people, though they do have other folks that are committed to their cause.
Yeah.
So they're still planning on trucking along, at least according to their website. But yeah, I think you probably got a pretty good case to be made of like without a laundry list of victories or even a short list necessarily of like policies that have been put through by or stamped by this organization.
Mhm.
It's hard for something to maintain staying power and like really continue to exist when it seems like there's political capital and then there's actual capital and just how much they're able to continue to raise to keep supporting it. So I don't know
Yep.
that many candidates are likely to continue pushing for an organization that isn't directly benefiting them in some particular way.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, and you could go the other way with it. You could say that like the no labels party um will, I don't know, does have a future. You know what I mean? It's like,
Mhm.
so the affirmative might have, that might be a little bit more on point, because I think that might be a little more along the lines of a burden of proof that,
Sure.
like I think that presumption might be leaning towards no labels kind of, is starting into its own death spiral right now.
Mhm.
And so, like, can you make an argument that no labels actually has a future, and that they will, they will affect American politics in some way? Um, but I'm not sure. So,
Yeah, I think another topic that I think may come out is rather than just current status, more so like how do their ideals match up in trying to compare. So I was thinking about a topic that would be probably more like value related rather than
right.
fact. That would be like uh, the no labels movement is more aligned with I don't know the average voter, or the no labels movement I don't know has like a better policy plan than either major party or something like that. Because I
Yeah.
think I
Like,
see comparatives topics from time to time
yeah,
of like, I think we've even done on this podcast, like the Republicans are better at politics. And like you
right.
get other interesting stuff where you can just analyze like, all right, the party as a whole, here's what they're doing. But then comparing against those, I've seen value-based topics that way, where it's like this particular philosophy is a better mechanism for making decisions or whatever. I think
Yeah.
something
No
like that.
labels. No labels is preferable to either political party.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be a pretty simple one.
So in that circumstance, I don't know if you're on the affirmative. Where do you start with something like that?
Um, Man, if I was on the affirmative, I think would be a little tough based on the stuff that I'm reading about. Um, I do I think I'd like to focus on their problem solving approach, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like, hey, let's just do this based on problem solving. I do have some problems of my own with the way that they're approaching that, right? Because like problem solving, usually you don't front load the solutions. Like you need to identify problems, and then we need to solicit,
Mhm.
feedback from people in order to how to solve it. And then the discussion starts there. But it seems like they're kind of going, all right, here's the problems, and here's our solutions that are different than their solutions. I'm like, that's not really a problem solving approach, right? That's
Yeah.
just it's just another political party. It really just and so I know I got to be but if I was on the affirmative though, I'd still highlight the intent and the literature that they've written up about it, about they're trying to focus on problem solving. They are clearly incorporating ideas from both sides of the political spectrum
Right.
in the platform that they wrote up and put on a PDF and stuff like that. And so I I think I'd go with that, where we need to take a step back, realize that not everyone's going to get everything that they want. Some things that you're just going to absolutely disagree with, but we still need to do things, right?
Right.
Like the government still needs to operate. We can't keep like doing the
Yeah.
government shutdown,
Right.
emergency every freaking 6 months. It's
Yeah.
like it's
And
ridiculous.
not passing like very, very basic, like common sense policies that just get held hostage because like, well, we also want this writer in there about abortion, or we also want this
Yeah,
writer in there about immigration. Like, and these random little non-germane writers end up, crippling what is otherwise really common sense, agreeable, policies. So
yeah,
it seems like those kinds of tools end up just undermining the whole process. So I
mhm,
think I would probably take it as a whole if I'm in the affirmative of like, all right, let's start with in order for something to be preferable, we need to establish just how good or bad are the current, two parties
right.
available, and just list out all the crap that is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
awful.
I
Like
mean, that becomes
that is an
easy.
easy bit of research and can be done just like bullet point, like Daily Style or Daily Show style of just
Yeah,
like, here are a bunch of really awful things that both parties are doing. We can agree everyone hates it. We hate it. We hate it. Great.
yeah,
Like when congressional approval ratings are, in the dumps consistently and now not getting better, like just because like it flops from red to blue, now one side is a little bit happier, but that does not mean like the whole system is working. I think that would be like the premise. That would be like the first premise that I would, take and then
yeah,
say,
yeah.
all right, here exists kind of just what you were saying, like an alternative mechanism of making decisions that acknowledges that not everyone gets everything they want, like
Mhm,
that recognizes and incorporates concession and like
yeah,
understands like different viewpoints have to be viewed. So I wouldn't even say that that's to say like this is the best party or something like that, or like this is the right way to make decisions or anything. It's just that it is better than the alternative. I think
yeah,
like it can be largely boiled down to like every decision becomes a false dichotomy of,
mhm,
do you believe this about this policy, or are you just a dirty Democrat, or do you believe
yeah,
this about this policy, or are you just with the Republicans? Like
yeah,
that's that is logically fallacious. Like that at its core is not how good decisions are made. Like that's not how like sound logic is concluded upon. And yet those are the decisions that are given to us because it's a
yeah,
two-party system, and they're just juggernauts of finance and support and I don't know, tribalism. So
yeah,
I think I could take even like their actual policy positions, their public opinion, or just the logical underpinnings of like what we're presented with, and then say a third option is preferable because it breaks down each of those things.
yeah.
So
You
yeah,
basically, yeah, you set up a very low hurdle for
right.
yourself. You're like, hey, I
Exactly.
cleared it. Take a look at that. And it's not, yeah, I think that is probably the stronger way to go because it just feels intuitive that way.
Mhm.
On the negative though, there's just some man, there are some problems with the no labels movement. Like and these problems are only going to get heightened the more press coverage they get. Like
Mhm.
simple things like, "What are you?" Like like what do we call you? And it's like, "Oh, it's a movement," but they filed as a social welfare organization, a
Right.
501(c)(4)
Oh,
organization.
okay. Is that
Yeah.
just for like donation capabilities?
Yeah, yeah. And so in order to raise funds, it means that it's a social welfare organization that can engage in political campaigns on behalf of or in opposition to candidates for public office, provided that such intervention does not constitute the organization's primary activity.
Huh.
So, like,
Clever.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, how? Okay, like their big thing was like, oh, we're going to field a presidential candidate in 2024. We're looking for one. Like they were pushing for it, pushing for it, pushing for it, and only just recently decided not to do it.
Right.
That kind of sounds like the primary activity. Like it kind
Yeah.
of it seems like that was what they were going for, and I think a lot of people were, and some of the donors are a little bit pissed about that. And there, I think there might even be some lawsuits coming out that there was like a little bait and switch where they're like, yeah, we're just going to try to do problem solving. And then they take all that money. It's like, all right, let's find a presidential candidate. And so, or I think I'm getting that right, because that's what it seems like the how you file as a social welfare organization. If you like suddenly pivot toward running a candidate, like,
Yeah.
I mean, like there's a lot of ways to measure that. Like, where
Yeah.
is most of your money going? Is it for
Sure.
that campaign? That makes it the primary, right? It's
Right.
like if most of your money is paying for like, you know, staff writers and campaign managers and things like that. It's like that's a political party, not a social welfare organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they would probably end up having to immediately, quickly reckon with that. I don't know, maybe it's just because I love an underdog. Like I want to not pick apart some of the things of like, well, let's let their idealism kind of play out and see is this like a better way to do campaign finance or something like that. Like maybe that, I mean, that could be kind of an interesting debate in itself. Like political parties must become 501c4s.
Oh,
Where
wow.
they no longer can funnel the majority of their wealth into a particular candidate or into supporting these candidates. Like they can support general ones, but it's got to be like evenly distributed and not just a massive glut behind their presidential candidate. Once again, though, I do want to caution. I don't know that it's necessarily just because they had a presidential ticket that is like their primary thing. I think that's certainly the most flashy and what like the majority of Americans maybe spend most brain power thinking about. But that doesn't seem to be the thing that they're talking about the most on their website. It doesn't seem to be like it seems to be pretty policy oriented rather than person oriented. And I think that probably is a little bit dissonant to minds that expect a hero in a story. In any like storytelling that we've got, it's like, okay, here's all these ideas and here's these fundamentals and here's these things we're fighting against. And that's why we support this hero. And to have a story without a hero character doesn't really like play in, I feel like a Western mindset where otherwise like you've got these kind of predictable, comfortable narratives that are around like, well, we're here to change, or we're here to make America great again, or we're here to take back whatever. Like you've got these rallying cries around an individual person that seems like they tried to hide that they didn't have the candidate, but they tried not to make it like in service of this single hero's arc. But that doesn't really like win as well when you've got otherwise this pretty like well-trod path. And that's unfortunate. Like I wish it weren't so focused on like getting this presidential candidate based on a bunch of these, buzzwords basically and like fitting pieces in. Like I like a more basic, simple, understandable, compromising policy approach. I wanted to just question for a second, which you said their whole problem-solving caucus. So like that's part of this like thing that they put forth is they have these conventions, these little caucuses where they talk about particular issues. And you were saying that they were front-loading solutions. How maybe it's just from like a marketing standpoint, like how better could they answer your concern as a voter or as a citizen? Like, do you want to see their process? Like, do you wish that they like showed their work of coming to a particular conclusion?
Yeah, like like I don't just teach debate, I also teach like group dynamics, and in group dynamics there's decision making processes where like you can learn a step-by-step method for making decisions without like without presupposing a conclusion. And that's what I was hoping. I'm like, oh, problem solving, huh? And then they're like, yeah. And so this is our stance on immigration. This is our stance on, guns. This is our stance on Social Security. I'm like, okay, so what if I have a different solution to that problem? Like, does that mean I just,
find another party chump?
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, so it just seems, it was just a little disappointing in that one because I don't know, like I might be somewhat idealistic, but I was thinking that the way that politics might be best is if you don't have policy stances and you just have methods that you're going to use. It's like, listen, we get like they have a caucus of 60 people. Okay. It's like this caucus is going to have a discussion. It's going to go through these steps. On step 1, we do this. Step 2, we do this. And in the end, we will come to a conclusion, even if you don't like it. You know what I mean? Even if one or more people don't like it, they'll just kind of accept that the process is what's working, right? And I think that's what like America started with, is that they put out a process, right? It's like, how
Hmm.
are we going to make decisions?
Yeah.
And then allow that to happen. It's been going, off and on, as far as successfulness for several hundred years now. But if we kind of take a step back and kind of go, hey, let's stop thinking about like what my personal beliefs are and think about how do groups of people make decisions.
Mhm.
Like I don't know, if people had that perspective, they might, I don't know, maybe not. It might be different, but
I think that's the theoretical idea behind a representative democracy, is that you
yeah.
are selecting the person that uses the best decision-making tools, like that goes through the right process. Because we don't have a direct democracy where we get to actually vote on policy, ideally you're picking the best problem solvers. The problem is, I think like that it seems like if a candidate ran and they were like, I'm really smart, I'm really good at making decisions, and you should vote for me. And people are like, oh well, what do you believe in? I believe in making decisions. Like that's the plot of Hamilton. Like that's what Aaron Burr did. Of like, didn't have a particular position, he just like got support from people. And so I think that isn't as appealing. I think there's like a strong underpinning to like, we want to know what someone's values are. The problem is people are not like candidates do not end up being proxies for their particular policy. They
Yeah,
run on policies and then go against those all the damn time. There
yeah,
is no recourse between candidates and their electorate besides the next election that tends once again to come down to finance. Like it really
yeah,
is, like the people even that are in Congress that have been there forever, that are dinosaurs that have been doing it for decades at this point, still went against so many of the policy positions that they like originally ran on or ran on over various points in time. They just kind of like tap into the zeitgeist when it's election season and flood the TV channels and radio waves and any other way that campaigns happen these days. And like that's, I feel like, where it seems like they're saying vote for me as a vote for this policy, this policy, and this policy. I like
mhm,
your idea of saying instead like it is to come to these particular conclusions. But that does feel like it's a radical divorce from the existing path.
yeah,
It
yeah.
may be
I
good,
agree.
right? Like that's kind of what they're saying.
Yeah, yeah, I agree that it is kind of radical, and not in like an extremist way, but in like it kind of, we'd have to rethink some fundamental assumptions about how we elect people. Like, because like when some people think of elections as like a hiring process.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And like when you hire somebody, it's not because you are expecting, like maybe sometimes you hire them to do a single job, but if you're hiring someone for 2 years, you're not hiring them necessarily for a single project. And like you're expecting them to fill a certain function in your organization, and
Hmm.
they need to have that skill set in order to do it. Maybe there's one thing that you want them to do, but they are going to be faced with many other tasks
Totally.
other than the thing that they were hired to do. And
Sure.
so, like, if we want to really, it's like we should be really looking for that type of stuff. People that are able to make good decisions, not just to parrot what everyone else is saying in on the media, or because right now it's really about who can get the most attention. I was
Yeah.
on Google News, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is like every other story, and I couldn't tell you one policy that she's put forward that had any chance, but I could tell you all the crazy stuff that she says, and
Right.
I guess there's no such thing as bad press. So
Yeah.
she's
As has been made evident the last 8 years.
yeah, yeah. So like, I kind of want politicians to be boring again. I want
That's
them to be.
yeah. Someone was saying like I want a hat that says that too. Of like, remember when no one wanted to talk politics because it was just drab and
Yeah,
stupid and no one cared?
yeah,
That.
yeah,
um,
yeah. And so like people saying this is my policy position, this is my policy position, like especially as a president. In my opinion, presidents shouldn't be talking about policy. They're just like, listen, am a good executive. You tell me what the laws are. I know what the laws are. You should say, don't tell me what the laws are. It's like, I
yeah.
know what the laws are. Yeah. It's like, I know what the laws are. I don't agree with all of them, but I will enforce them this way.
Yeah, I think the probably should be a topic that we get into the power and like the continued like evolution of the power of executive orders. I think makes
Yeah.
that so different, where it's like you basically are electing a super congressperson, where
Hmm.
like they're just going to sweepingly make a bunch of stuff happen. And I think that's like the appeal. Like it's part of why in debate, like, any type of procedural argument gets so damn popular, because it's a one-shot kill. So like theoretically, if you can get one person that can just like wave their hand and make a bunch of things happen, that's a lot easier than the like, all right, getting these states together and grouping this together so you get the majority in this house, and then getting this group to get the majority in this house, so you can pass things through. Like that's a much more complicated, challenging game that like it feels like to especially a single voter that only has the potential to elect their 2 representatives instead. And like it's a big complicated game that may not have a say in like, well, if I get my one candidate and they can just kind of make a bunch of stuff happen that I want to happen, that seems like a more like easily processed, appealing answer. But I feel like that's really overdone. Like I don't think the executive order was invented to be such a like sweeping capability. Sorry, we've diverged quite a bit from the no labels movement, but I think their intention is to be the like, we are a decision making group.
Right.
I don't fault them for putting forth the conclusions I would assume that came out of those decision caucuses. But I like what you're saying. Like if they showed their work of like, how did you come to this conclusion? I mean, what was your process getting there? Rather than just like it pulled right, that like you can pick and choose. Because it seems like maybe they're trying to be the like, I don't know, like Dish Network, where it's like, all right, instead we're just going to pick and choose these particular policies that landed with these other organizations. Like you've got these 2 choices. Well, let's just put those together, and now you've got a new package, and that makes us more, appealing.
I mean, hell, I would appreciate that even more. And in my opinion, that should be right up top. You know what I mean? It's like, listen, the way that we came to these policy decisions is that we took the most popular ideas from across the country and we put them into one platform.
Huh.
Like, like, just tell me. And then like, oh, that's how you came to these things. You know what I mean? It's like, if that's the case, then that's cool. But also like those policy proposals should change based off of new data, right? Like and so how does it change and when does it change? Like, so I'm getting like, there is another topic that you could, it's like, what does the no labels movement need to do in order to be successful, or what should the no label movements do? What should they be like? You could make it more of a policy topic that way. It's like how it's like just what ways to improve the new labels movement, and that might be something. And this might be the area that I'm going towards, is like actually embrace the problem solving approach rather than your conclusions. The process rather than the end result.
Yeah, you raise another point that actually honestly might be another topic, but like why polling seems to be left to third parties. And like you've got some really strong third parties. Like Gallup is a good polling source, I would say. Like there exists a few that seem to do it really well. Is it just because Gallup trounced like whatever the previous polling source was? Like they've got their cool origin story about how they predicted the election just perfectly and they've done better since. Was it that there was like an actual federal polling office, like some government organization that was in charge of polling that was like a nonpartisan thing? Because so, that seems like that would make a lot of sense. Like if you can get a really good quality poll that's not, swayed by advertisement or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that a lot of like statistical analysis these days is doing really, really good. Like who's was it 538? Is that am I getting the wrong?
That's the right number.
Yeah. Like we have so sophisticated tools and techniques to like, compile people's opinions into a single thesis. Like we should use that. We're using like a 250-year-old system of like getting like, what does everyone feel? It's like, well, let's just elect somebody and then they will represent what everyone feels. Is like, well, there's a lot better ways to do that nowadays with all the communication technology that we got. I would love to see no labels embrace technology a lot more.
Sure.
It really seems like they're just doing the same old thing and just putting no label on it,
Yeah, that's fair. I feel that way, especially when I see the types of messages and the way that it's crafted and the way it's put forward, that it just feels like, okay, this is like they got a good campaign manager that flushed out of both parties or didn't like either party, and like they're just doing the same thing again.
Yeah.
So like if their messages were different, be more different.
Yeah. But I don't know. And maybe it's just my own pet project. I'd like to see some sort of political movement that's a little bit more focused on procedure and method than they are on conclusions.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Fair.
Like, it just feels like that's how the country got started. It's like, all right, let's just agree on a process. Because America was born of disagreement. I mean, the
Sure.
Constitutional Convention was just like it was a shouting match. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
people were not in agreement, right? And they viewed the different states like different countries, to more or less to a
Yeah.
certain degree. They were not each other's friends necessarily. They're like, okay, in order for us to have security and safety and stuff like that, let's come to an agreement about how decisions are going to be made. If it doesn't go my way, I'll accept that. And George Washington, I think, kind of helped with that, by stepping down and not being king and like rejecting that, so that sort of sentiment, while it wasn't necessarily applied universally to people, at least it was like this a little bit of a beginning, and we can develop that so it is more universal and
Yeah.
applied broadly and stuff like that. So it's not just a bunch of divas shouting about who is the best and who has the best makeup and like
Yeah.
who wore it better. I don't know.
Yeah, I do find a ton of disgust, and I feel like everyone feels quite a bit of disgust about that. So something new feels like the preferred flavor, but
Yeah.
interesting direction that no labels. Maybe if they're not the ones, they might be a progenitor to it. Like just here's some ideas of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's turned into just a just a discussion about everything.
Wide-ranging political diatribe.
Yeah.
Between Tim and Jared.
Well, you got to get that out every once in a while. We will be back talking about different topics in the future. It's Tim, Jared, we're DebateSensei. We'll see you later.